Welcome again. Good afternoon. This is the Authors Hour. My name is Fred Zirm, and I represent the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. We are a voluntary organization that aims to support and supplement the official activities of the Chautauqua Institution's Writers Center. And by supplementing those activities with things like the Authors Hour, we hope to encourage writers and promote writing at Chautauqua Institution, and these days, especially with Zoom and that, beyond. We'll have two authors, two poets today, and I'd like to introduce you to the first poet. And if you do want to see her fully, you should switch to speaker view. Carol Jennings grew up in East Aurora, New York, attended the College of Worcester, graduated from NYU, lived for more than a decade in New York City, and now resides in Washington, D.C. In New York, she worked at both the United Nations and the ACLU before earning a JD from the NYU School of Law. For much of her legal career, she served in the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Her poems have appeared in a number of journals, including the New York Quarterly, Chautauqua, the Broadkill Review, Innisfree Poetry Journal, Beltway Poetry Quarterly, Oberon, Potomac Review, Medical Literary Messenger, and Loch Raven Review, as well as in 3 anthologies. Her first poetry collection, The Dead Spirits at the Piano, was published in 2016 by Cherry Grove Collections. There it is, and I think I've put information on how to find out more about Carol's books and my books in chat. I will double check that as I turn it over to Carol Jennings.
Well, welcome everybody. This is a great turnout. People from all parts of my life, I think even going back to elementary school, which is lovely. You see the bit of the piano in the background here. It's my prop. I don't think you'll see any of the spirits, but one never knows. I'm going to start out with a new poem, not in the book, about the time that we are living through and have been living through. It's called The Viscosity of Corona Time. Because to me, the time seems thicker somehow. The days become slow-moving water. The mirror blurs your face while your mind can barely skim the surface of anything. Quarantine causes headache, imbalance, numb spirit, flattened affect, symptoms seldom fatal, and a glass of wine may enhance perception of blended time. These things change only in sleep, when you can walk close to others, even touch a stranger. In dreams, the rules change. There are no masks. All intruders are visible. Though the virus may helicopter around you, even light on your hair or an eyelash, it is not mutated to invade the subconscious of REM sleep. In my childhood, they warned against swimming in the creek because polio might lurk in the water, waiting to kill or cripple children. But we did not wear masks, and we could touch almost anything. Mother liked to tell how she nearly died in the 1918 epidemic. In old age, she remained angry at the doctor who delivered a grim prognosis in deep voice at the door of her room. Father was a pharmacist who instructed me about proper hand washing, cough covering, germs that linger invisible in the air, flit person to person, enter the body like an evil spirit. If he were alive, he would work through this epidemic, count pills, measure liquids, mix compounds, gloved and masked, tell me too often that he was right. And now I'll go to the book. The first one I like to read is about John Keats because he's the first poet I loved since high school. And then 40 some years later, I was in the house where he died in Rome, and in fact, in the bedroom where he died, and looking out the window at the view that he had of the Spanish Steps and the Piazza di Spagna, the Bernini boat, which he must have looked at many times in his last months. And this poem started writing itself in my head. In Rome with John Keats. In the small room where you died, I stand at the end of a narrow bed, as perhaps you did on better days. Stare out the window at Bernini's boat, still sinking on the Piazza di Spagna. And had you not been so weak, his marble boat, like the Elgin marbles, might have sparked another ode or sonnet on mortality, a new metaphor for the life slowly leaving you. In those last days, to which poem did you turn for comfort? I would guess the nightingale, your darkling singing to you in full-throated summer ecstasy out of the embalming dark in high requiem for a coming February death. Or could it be the urn, with lovers on the brink like you and Fanny, bliss always out of reach? Nothing is left of your time here but Severn's deathbed portrait, tendrils of hair damp on your forehead, lids shut, candles throwing shadows on your face, still perfect at the end. Though they burned all you touched in a bonfire below, you linger here, listening for footsteps on the stairs, horses on the square, mandolin players on the Spanish Steps, the poem and the blood rising in your throat. He died of tuberculosis at 25 or 26. The next one is the first poem in the book, Mano Sinistra. The Mano Sinistra, of course, is the left hand, the sinister hand. And in piano music, the term is used to indicate the left hand crosses over the right. This poem is about a Schubert sonata that I played and remember my mother playing, where there is a lot of left hand crossing over. I have carried mother's tattered Schubert sonatas, impromptus, fantasias, back and forth to piano lessons. Bought before I was born, binding held by tape, its cover and pages leave paper crumbs on walkways, in cars, on pianos. For months, I have struggled with the B-flat major sonata, composed 2 months before his young death. Its broad reaches exceed mine, as I recall how mother's long fingers handled them with ease. Here, my teacher says, skip to the andante movement. It's astounding, and you can do it. He shows me how it is played. The left hand, mano sinistra, crossing over the right, to touch the upper octave ever so lightly, a sound you can barely hear, but feel that you have heard it. As he plays, I hear mother 50 years ago at her piano, while in the next room I read, solved math problems, daydreamed my future. Mother giving voice to Schubert's sense of death, me absorbing both of them, but barely so, not knowing it. I rush home to her piano, now mine, so we can play Schubert, mourn him a little, the two of us together. And here's another music poem called With Grieg and Fjord Country. We went to Norway several years ago, and I was just delighted to find that he is a national hero. His music is everywhere, statues of him, his spirit is everywhere. And it's so nice. Instead of a general or something like that, it's classical composer. I did not come to Norway looking for you, but you are everywhere, your A minor concerto pulsating with the hairpin loops of our bus high above the fjords. The notes of your lyric themes were shaped in these glacier-carved waters, deeper than most imaginations, mirror for mountains always under snow. While your Peer Gynt suite was spun out of the forest where trolls and gnomes stormed from the hall of the Mountain King across your piano keys. You laughed at your own music for its very Norwegianness, called it the taste of codfish, the odor of cow dung in the pasture, too full of trollish self-satisfaction. At the Lofthus Inn where you stayed in summer, you stand carved in wood in the garden by the cottage where you composed at a piano no longer played, long out of tune. Surprised by your small stature, I put my arm around you, though your wife, also in wood, stands close behind. I never imagined you a short man. At the hotel in Bergen, where you collapsed before dying, I wander the hallways at night. Your ghost lingers here. Also at Trollhagen, your villa outside of town, now a tourist stop, as you may observe from the cliffside grotto where they buried both of you. I pause at your back door to have my photo shot while absorbing the lake view, happy for you that Norway loved you and you lived well. Home again at my own piano, I play The Last Spring every day. Try to plumb this unexplained elegy that caused Tchaikovsky to weep, now me as well. I like that you felt no need to explain its sadness, played out with a touch that does not overwhelm, but brushes lightly a bit of mystery in its sense of ending. This is my knee surgery poem for all of you who've had knee surgery. The Art of the Scalpel. Inner landscape of my knee, white spheres captured on pencil-thin camera, threaded into fissure of flesh while I was drugged and dreamt of striped fish and coral reefs. Before pictures reveal a tattered topography, tosses from horses, falls down stairs, stumbles on cracked walks, kneeling on stone surfaces in prayer or despair. My surgeon displays his after photos. Clean sculpture of cartilage, edges round, ragged fragments trimmed, meniscus tear mended, signs of age obliterated. I admire his art as he expects. What else can you cut from me, I want to ask? Shards of unwanted memory, shrapnel of loves gone bad, or the cancer of self-doubt? But I have no more joints to fix, so he dismisses me, proffers his photos as parting gift. Pretty moons, luminous on black background, orthopedic purity, no blood, no scars. Have a nice life. He smiles and leaves. And this one is for all of the insomniacs out there, called Bedtime for Insomniacs. Bolt the door against demons, intruders, lost lovers. Lower the thermostat, avoid overheated dreams. Turn the cat out to probe the underside of night. Put pens away, lock the diary against entry. Wash hands and face, purge the mind of reason and light. Flip switches room by room on the day's detritus. Recycled news of murder, war, court decrees, storms, half-formed arguments, unfinished messages, dishes not cleared, love undeclared. Don't untangle lies, add costs, or repent sins. Tell the spirits of the dead to leave through one window left open. Or if they must stay, to settle down, stop fluttering, cease commenting on the messiness of life. I'd like to turn now to some newer things, not in the book. Hopefully it will be in a second book. This one is called After a Certain Age, I wrote it last year for my 75th birthday. Do not count the number of funerals attended, people who have professed to love you, foreign countries not visited, vanishing rings of Saturn, wrong notes played in a Mozart sonata, or inches of sea level rise. And do not listen to the noise that is news, nor the harsh words of the dies irae. You will know when you have reached that age. Pay attention to stars in the darkest skies, planets visible to your unaided eye, lengthening daylight after winter solstice, layers of igneous rock in deep canyons, your ancestors. Time is an artificial construction, music that outlives its composer. I have a couple poems about glaciers. I became very interested in glaciers after first reading about them in 9th grade science. And I think there may be some people on here who were in that class with me. And I remained interested in glaciers. And now, of course, they're a subject of great worry and sadness because we're losing them. This is called calving. Greenland glaciers calve with sonorous ring, while ablation of ice mass turns blue meltwater rivulets into quiet rivers to the sea. I fell in love with glaciers because their language is rich with French, and also feared them because my earth science text warned another ice age could come, though not quickly. I made a list of things to do: walk, then kneel on a glacier top, drink the waters of a Mulan, see the Matterhorn, read tales of hikers falling in a crevasse, listen to the harmonies of calving. Now I have done all of these and no longer fear the ice, but the loss of it. Glaciers, centuries that warn of ancient microbes, the warm human fingerprint, the tipping point, Greenland waters at the door. And this is another glacier poem called Mulan. A Mulan is a deep shaft or well in a glacier where the meltwaters fill it up. Take the time to walk back to the Pleistocene, just off the highway between Jasper and Banff. Park the car to board a snow bus that deposits you on the ice field, where you can guzzle glacial meltwater from a Mulan. Water with the purity that preceded your species. Pay attention, or you could tumble into a crevasse from which you would not emerge until the ice is melted. Kneel down, touch the glacial tongue with reverence, but know that you violate it. Consider that it recedes and loses depth beneath your body, that it may disappear within the life of your child. Let the ice pierce a hole in you, even as it melts. This is another music poem called Playing Brahms' Intermezzo in A major. This particular intermezzo is just pure longing and that never resolves. And for me, it became sort of a way of exploring Brahms' relationship with Clara Schumann, whom he fell in love with, I think, the day he met her. Of course, she was married to Robert Schumann, and Robert was very helpful to Brahms in launching his career. And Brahms was devoted to him. And Robert spent the last years of his life in, I guess, what would have been called an insane asylum. And Clara wasn't allowed to visit him, but Brahms did regularly and shared music with him. So it was a very interesting tripartite relationship. And Brahms and Clara never did marry, even when she was a widow. They remained friends. And the question of biographers always is whether the love was ever consummated, and most of them guess not. Sorry. Playing Brahms' Intermezzo in A major. Intermezzo, an arc and interlude, connects pieces of a story or dance, not the bridge, but, sorry, start again. Intermezzo, an arc and interlude, connects pieces of a story or dance, but for you it became the whole, not the bridge between. The motif here is longing, one too pure for language, even that of poetry, too pure to touch. I played the A major to link you and Clara, the golden-haired young composer and the dazzling pianist with eyes of deep lapis and a mad music genius husband. I practice each day to work your longing into my fingers on the keys, knowing the music will never resolve. It began when you knocked on the Schumann door in Dusseldorf. In their parlor, you played the piano, first with an echo of Beethoven, then your own contrapuntal inventions, polyphonic fabric, shifting accents. You paused as Robert summoned Clara, and out of her electric gaze, the arc ascended. Part of a skewed triangle, you loved her, but devoted yourself to him through his one-way descent into the black tunnel of his mind. Even when Clara was widowed, you could not marry her, perhaps because you felt stained by the women and men at the dockside Hamburg brothel, where the blonde boy of you once played a tinny piano for coins to feed your family. You could never make love to one you actually loved, or one with whom you shared a bed. The longing made its own life, not the entr'acte, but the act itself, connected to no ending but death, whichever death came first. Brad, how am I doing on time? Okay. Okay, this one is called Poem After Merwin's One of the Lives, Merwin being poet W.S. Merwin. The form is like one long run-on sentence that winds around and leaps from one thing to another, and no punctuation. What we were all taught not to do in eighth grade English. But here it works because it's talking about how life unfolds, because one thing happened, another thing, and if this hadn't happened, this wouldn't, and so on. And it's also how the mind works when we're kind of reflecting on how life unfolded. Because a storm called Petra has brought down heavy snow, and I am bound by deepening drifts, I read about the last interglacial warm period, newsworthy now, because scientists on Baffin Island, watching mountain glaciers retreat backwards, have found remains of plants that thrived more than 100,000 years ago, when sea levels were high enough to cover most of the settings of my life, including New York and the streets of Greenwich Village, where I unwound the strings of youth to love unwisely, learned languages of law and poetry, took the A train to the cloisters to wander among unicorn tapestries displaced from their European origins, discovered that 19th century composers can heal almost anything in me that might fracture. And then, losing the desire to live in the canyons of tall buildings, invented another life in a city with tight limits, where politics are loud and unctuous lies great. And I must block the noise with my grand piano. And if the violin player had not rejected my mother, and her Southern Belle grandmother not suggested it was for the best because the tall cellist chemist would be a better husband anyway, perhaps none of this would have happened, as I would be a different combination of genes that might not have chosen New York or law or piano or any city, and would embrace a more tactile field like geology and spend my days among rocks, then bow a stringed instrument to ease the layers of tension that build from looking too far back or forward in time. Well, I've used my 20 minutes, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. I really admire your ability to combine the philosophical with the closely observant and not be preachy about it. I think we have one person who is not muted, Linda Adcock. If you could mute yourself. I feel like I'm reverting to my teacher self. Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay, just a few more words about the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center and Chautauqua before we get to our next reader, who I happen to know. Behind me is a picture of the Writers Center, of the Literary Arts Center at Alumni Hall, more properly at Chautauqua. If you're not familiar with Chautauqua, please look into it. Let me see if I can share a screen with some connections. Has that come up?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So www.chq.org, if you just want to learn about Chautauqua in general, it's a sort of cultural Disneyland with lectures and performances and courses. If you want to find out more about the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center, go to the same website, but add a slash and a WC. Some of our main activities upcoming, on Sundays at 5, we have an open mic. Anybody is welcome to attend. And there's a link on our webpage to that. It's a Zoom event. If you want to attend future authors' hours, there's a link there. And all the authors' hours are on a YouTube channel for the Friends of the Chautauqua Writers Center. So that link is there also. If you're a writer, we do have a contest, normally limited to those people who come on grounds for Chautauqua events. But since no one is coming on grounds for events this unusual summer, I declare you all eligible. And there's a link there as well. If you want to take part in more of the virtual events that the institution is sponsoring, go to assembly.chq.org. There's a free 90-day trial membership, which basically encompasses the summer, and you can see lots of things. We got to see Ben Folds a little while ago. The Abbott brothers will be coming up. Anna DeVere Smith, lots of either famous or should be famous people perform, talk, share their wisdom at Chautauqua. So please take a look. I do want to remind you there'll be a Q&A that you can either share on chat or go to participants and raise your hand or wave wildly and hope one of us sees that. Carol is going to take care of the next introduction. I wonder why.
After earning a BA and MA in English from Michigan State and an MFA from the Playwrights Workshop at the University of Iowa, Fred Zirm spent nearly 40 years teaching English and drama at Landon, an independent school in Bethesda, Maryland. Since his retirement, he has continued to direct plays, but is also focused on writing poetry, flash fiction, and creative nonfiction. His work has been published in about a dozen small literary magazines and anthologies, including Still Crazy, Cahuta Doodling, Neat, Voices de la Luna, Greek Fire, and Objects in the Rearview Mirror. He lives with his wife and younger daughter in Rockville, Maryland. And I would also like to add that I've been in many workshops with Fred, and Fred tends to be much funnier than I am in poetry. So enjoy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for cursing me. Now I'm supposed to be hilarious, right? Anyway, I'm going to read a fair number of poems from 2 upcoming publications. I don't have any books in hand, but I do have 2 chapbooks. Chapbooks, for those of you who don't know, are shorter books, 30 to 40 pages of poetry in this case. I'd like to read a few poems, first of all, from the chapbook Object Lessons, which Main Street Rag will be publishing in the winter or spring of 2021 with pre-sale in late 2020. This first poem comes from a class taken at the Writers Center from Kevin Young back in 2009. Kevin Young is now the editor of poetry for The New Yorker, and I keep waiting for him to call me. Anyway, he assigned us the challenge of writing an elegy, and this was in 2009, so rather than writing an elegy about a person, this was the time when all broadcasting switched to digital. So I wrote this poem. An Elegy for Analog, June 12th, 2009. On this day, analog TV gave up the ghosts and the snow and the tinfoil on the antenna and the test pattern at night and the national anthem at dawn, and this is a test, and horizontal hold and the slap on the side before you phoned the repairman who wore a uniform and tubes that glowed like embers and tube testers at the local hardware, and the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, and opera singers and jugglers on the Ed Sullivan Show, and families huddled round that black and white campfire eating Swanson's TV dinners before the sets became colorful behemoths carted off on gurneys to make way for the flat screens, as slim as trophy wives, to be put on a pedestal and admired. Picture perfect as only a paint by numbers picture can be. 0, 1, 0, 1, off on, no, yes, no, yes. Those supermodels say, digital is so decisive, but sometimes I miss maybe. That's what I call one of my grumpy old man poems about how things used to be. You know, nostalgia is not what it used to be, right? Here's a short poem dedicated, well, Chautauquans would know Herb Kaiser, who sells lemon tarts after events to raise money for the institution. So here's a poem called Lemon Tart. Yes, I like the creamy filling well enough, citric sweetness that lives up to its name, but I love the bottom crust the best, especially when it's nearly burnt but not bitter. Singed crunch that clings to what it's baked in and takes some digging to reclaim. Without it, the center would not hold and melt away like joy uncontained. Here's a longer poem, also written for a course at the Writers Center. Putting the spoons away. When I unload the dishwasher, I place the spoons in the drawer in separate stacks, one for the curve-handled for company, another for the flat for every day. Once they are placed in regimented rows, I am the captain of the cutlery. But when my wife's sister beat a retreat from her boulder trading post in Utah and came to live with us, her blood and brain polluted by the waste her failing liver could not purge, all my systems were upset by her addled efforts. Bug spray mistaken for carpet cleaner, the vacuum constantly clogged with debris she could not see, and the silverware a jumbled mess until the final days when her burr trail ended midst Maryland oak rather than quaking aspen. Then, after a few years of order, our daughter returned home with her cats, her lizards, and her tears, mourning her boyfriend's death, the loss of her scar-crossed Romeo, a creature of a different spoon-filled habit. Now, when I see chaos in the cutlery or other things in disarray, I am reminded that a little disorder is better than early death, that any death feels something like defeat, that every day should be treated like a special guest. A short poem that I thought of while trying to clean up a mess. Glass on the floor. When something fragile falls, something precious shatters, you can never sweep up all the pieces that have scattered. And here's a poem based on wondering about how something got its name. Venetian blinds. Slats of shadow, slots of sunlight, angling between the nearly invisible and the almost opaque. What do they have to do with Venice? Were they invented there to cut down the glare from the Grand Canal? Or were they hung in the back of gondolas so romantic couples could open them to see the sights, or close them for a moment of private passion while the gondolier improvised an aria to impress the tourists? I could probably Google the answer, but speculation can be so much more fun than knowledge, like seeing vague silhouettes behind the blinds beneath a Venetian moon. Venetian blinds were invented in Persia, but imported by Venetians. Here's a little more exotic one. Back in 1983, I did a solo cycle tour around Greece, and I was surprised by something I found on the Acropolis. The cactus on the Acropolis makes me imagine tumbleweed as well, flowing across the stone orchestra of the ancient theater of Dionysus, where Aeschylus and Aristophanes circle each other and then square off, 6 guns slung from tooled leather belts wrapped around their gleaming white togas. You know, kid, character is fate, Aeschylus sneers, his hands hovering over his revolver's shiny pearl handles. Cerberus barks in the distance. Those saloon girl muses peek out from behind the marble pillars. Thetis drags her young son Achilles by the heel off the streets to safety. Smile when you say that, butch, Aristophanes replies and spits at his opponent's feet. The muses gasp. Thetis clutches Achilles close to her chest. The tragedian just stares at the dark spot in the dust and looks his enemy in the eye. This town ain't big enough for the both of us, he snarls. Neither one of them sees the sniper on the roof. To be honest, I didn't see the sniper on the roof till I got the end of this poem. I thought it was going to have a nice happy ending about how Athens was big enough for the both of them. And then that darn sniper showed up with the senseless terror that is not tragedy and not comedy. It's just senseless. Sensible shoes. I like shoes that feel like sneakers, but look good enough for work. Nothing fancy, just light, comfortable, and cheap. I'll save the dress shoes for weddings and funerals. But now both my low-priced pairs make a sticky click when I walk. Like a gummy thumbtack that isn't there. Different brands, same flaw, and perhaps the same South Asian sweatshop where some child nodded off over the machine that molds souls. Or, totally awake, made some flawed on purpose to remind us of the cost of what we're walking on. Here's one for the Chautauqua Post Office. Some of you know, some of you don't. It's an old-fashioned post office. Inside the box. The antique post office boxes stand stacked in rows like tiny treasure chests. Their aged brass dully glowing in the lobby's filtered sunlight. Patrons peer through misted glass to glimpse shadowy possibilities. The staggered lean of envelopes, the graceful curl of magazines, then crouch or stretch like safecrackers, slowly spinning the combination until the lock yields, the doors open, and the prize is revealed. Mostly coupons and come-ons, counterfeits reminding us in this life of circulars, much is promised and little delivered. More bed and bath rather, than beyond. Here is a node to a commonly misplaced object with some revisions courtesy of some friends I see out there. Apologia pro oblivio, to the latest of my lost umbrellas. Foul weather friend, forgive my forgetting you every time it turns fair, leaving you at some cineplex or under a fast food chair. What is so expandable should not be so expendable, but what is easily carried is also easily left behind. abandoned, with just the second thought. If I find you where I think I left you, I pledge to keep you close, though we both be worn round the edges, slow to open, and prone to sudden collapse. Since you have been compact for me, this is my compact with you. When the sun shines, you can be my parasol, and I, your anchor against the wind. The second chapbook that's due out later in the year is Stages of Development. A publisher presented a challenge for people to write 30 poems in 30 days during National Poetry Month, which is April. And they were supposed to do about a single theme. Since I have been a director for, 45, 46 years, I thought about the relationship between the life and stage and life. This first poem is inspired by a role-playing game I frequently used in my classroom. International Airport. My classroom turns concourse. Each student dealt a role to play. Hotshot pilot, disguised rock star, desperate groupie, drunken doctor, pregnant woman, two terrorists searching for each other. All colorful characters bumping into each other with clear objectives, except for the one person sitting in a corner or vaguely wandering around the room while clutching the card that says, "Be yourself." Here's a poem I wrote pre-quarantine. You'll find out why it's important it's pre-quarantine in a while. I don't know if you ever wonder who you really are. This is called Mission Impossible. And we have some days, excuse me, I'm gonna just try to take care of something here. Cheryl, can you, Ellery, if you could mute yourself, please, at least in my screen, I'm getting you. Okay. We'll go on. This might be voice only. I don't know what you're seeing on yours. It's okay? Okay, I'm the only one getting Ellery, okay. Mission Impossible. Some mornings I stare at myself in the mirror and wonder if I might be my own imposter, taught to imitate my daily routine well enough to fool everyone but me, who originated the role. I then stand frozen, unsure which side of my face I usually shave first, as if it were a security question I have never answered before, as if one false move would set off an alarm and bring in the thought police. Although my older daughter studied ballet for years, and I truly love many things about the art form, it sometimes seems stagey and self-absorbed. So here's a poem about that. Pas de deux. The ballerina's beauty comes first, her partner content to present, admire, support, pointing toward her as if she were a game show prize, offering her a hand in her arabesque, spinning her slender waist as she turns, lifting her with as little apparent effort as possible, so she seems weightless, like grace and form and motion. Then each takes the stage alone, showing off to impress their absent lover while trying to outdo each other and win the audience's heart. He leaping like he's on another smaller planet, she spinning beyond dizziness until they force the crowd to clap and are loved enough to come together again for a final swirl and pose, tempted to take one too many bows in the fading light. Here's a list poem based on a common theatrical list that I hope tells this story. Props list. One tall frosted glass, two straws, 1 red rose, 1 wrist corsage, pink, 1 boutonniere, white, 1 bouquet, baby's breath, yellow and white roses, 6 champagne glasses, 1 bottle of white wine, 2 wine glasses, 1 baby bottle, 6 envelopes, 1 checkbook, 1 pen, 1 whiskey bottle, 1 shot glass, 1 pill bottle, 1 bouquet dried flowers, 1 vase breakaway, 1 broom with dustpan, 1 set of keys, car and house, 1 red rose. Just a couple of non-chapbook poems, 2 of them that have to do, brief ones that have to do with the pandemic.
If she's lost out completely.
And we have somebody that needs to mute.
Do you know how, what is it you make eye contact?
I want you to see the shape of this one if you can. Shortness of breath. We do not have time to take in all the world has to offer, or even enough time to offer the world all we have taken in.
Okay.
And a short one called Reverse Forensic.
Just send it on my personal email.
Each morning I wipe the fingerprints off all the common surfaces before any crime can be committed. And I think I'm going to skip a poem because of time and just do one final poem that I hope ends up in a future collection. This was written right after finding out that my daughter was expecting, my oldest daughter. Matryoshka, for Meg. And so the generations nest inside each other like reversible Russian dolls. The woman who is my child has a child within her now, who may hold future memories of me for future family tales. Just as I recall my father's strength and my mother's touch when I think of infants in my arms. Thus, the bigger begets and is begotten by the small. When we embrace and are embraced by what we are and were and will become, doll within doll within doll, with our love bearing one another, the holder and the held, back to the cradle and back from the brink, again and again and again, until the very beginning meets the very end. And that's the very end of my reading. Let me just, oh, you know, Carol, let me show the full, I forgot to show this for Carol's. Let me first of all show you the fancy one for.
Okay, what I would, okay, I'd recommend.
For Carol's. That's the fancy version of what I put on chat and what I showed you. Okay. Let's stop sharing that. And could everyone please check their mute? We're having trouble with somebody talking over things. I think maybe you've seen this once before, but here's that information on my books. And now, if anyone has any questions, there are 2 official methods. One, let's see if anything has been submitted in chat that is a question. Or if anybody under participants wants to raise their hand.
And, you know, it'd probably be something like
Okay.
a while to start. But
okay, I'm gonna.
You know, any reputable.
Okay. I just muted everyone. Okay. And Carol, you can unmute yourself. Do we have any questions? You can either go to participant and raise the little blue hand. You can put it in chat. Yeah, Carol, you're going to have to unmute yourself. I can't seem to do it for you. There you go.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? There's a question for Carol. The poems you shared seem to offer a communion with the past. Do you ever find yourself engaged in speculation about the future in your work?
Good question. Well, not really. and the older you get, the less you want to speculate about the future. But yeah, I tend to focus on everything up until now and now. And
okay, and you got a good answer for that, Jennifer says. Okay. Any other questions, either by typing them in chat, raising your hand under participants, and or wildly waving your hands if you're on camera? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending. First of all, one thing I'm proud of, not that we're competitive at all here, but at Sunday's official reading, I believe it was Maddie Wall remarked, oh wow, we have 40 people. Well, we got up to about 61 with this, so that's a nice gathering, okay? Secondly, I just want to remind you, come back again. You may have come to this author's hour because you know one of us, but we have very powerful writers for this series. Next week, we have Patricia Abubak, who has just come out with her second novel. She's also a poet, but second novel, Resurrecting Rain, that has been garnering great reviews and is up for some prizes. And also, we have a poet who has taught at the Writers Center, Sharon Mccollum, very well-known, very skilled poet, reading from both Mad Woman and This Strange Land. One of the benefits of this strange time is that we haven't been confined to people who are on the grounds in any one week. And it's usually been impossible for us to get the teachers to read at the author's hour, because if they were on grounds, that meant they were teaching and they already had a brown bag in the Sunday reading that they were doing, so they wouldn't do that. But this year we had Sharon next week and Phil Turman a few weeks ago, okay? So anyway, please join us. Please think of joining the Friends and help sponsoring and underwriting all our activities. Until we see you again, please stay well. Thank you again, Carol. Wonderful job. Okay.
you too.
Okay. And do check us out on YouTube. If you missed part of this or want to see it again or want to recommend it to a friend, you go to that Chautauqua www.chq.org/FCWC. Under Author's Hour, there'll both be the Zoom link for live Author's Hour. And by tomorrow, I'll have this video posted. Anyway, take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone who came.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye.
for pulling
Carol,
this
if you
together.
maybe could stay, we can talk just a little bit
Yeah.
about how it went. Everybody else, if you could go bye-bye. Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Take care.